Welcome back to Living on the Ocean. We're gonna make a new carbon fiber chain plate for Trimaran Dawn. That's quite an important job, because the old one we had to take off when we extended the stern on the sandbank. This chain plate is very well connected to the stern of Trimaran Dawn because it holds the backstay that goes up to the top of the mast. So without good chain plates you may well lose your mast. This chain plate needs to be very strong, and as you can see in the old one they even used 7 bolts to connect it to the transom of Trimaran Dawn. And that is where the fibers of the transom take over the load. So there's nothing new about transferring the loads to the fibers. And we also reinforced the inside of the new transom with carbon fiber to take up those loads. What is interesting is how to connect the backstay to those fibers. And that's actually what the chain plate was doing. And for that we have to make a carbon fiber pipe to start with. And that was basically done by winding carbon fiber around an inox rod. Starting with a layer of glass fiber to avoid any galvanic corrosion. Using baking paper in between so that we can take it apart again. And all we need to do now is gluing this pipe to the top of a bulkhead. For that the bulkhead needs to be cut in the right angle and sanded very well so that we can laminate the pipe very strong with carbon fiber. Let's start the job!
So this pipe is going to be glued on here and then with carbon fiber be stuck on this. So that's the pipe after I cut off the bit. That's basically the end of the pipe that I'm making. We're gonna fiber like that, and then 2.5 centimeter opening, and then fiber again. So in total it's gonna be twice 4 and 2.5 is 10.5. So I'm gonna cut that again. So that's going to be my pipe. That needs to go there. Little foam here. Just cut that little piece, and that looked maybe quite dangerous because you could touch this. Actually it doesn't make a big movement, it makes a very quick left-right movement, and even when you touch your fingers it doesn't cut your fingers. What we have now is we have this pipe. It's going to be 4 centimeters, then 2.5 centimeters which we're going to cut out here. But we do that later, we don't want any epoxy to come in there. And then again 4 centimeters, and they're going to be glued away on here. It's going to have a 19mm stainless steel axle in it. That's the same as the backstay now has in the top of the mast as a clivet pin. So if I can do it on the top, I can do it on the bottom. Plus it's going to be by 2, so this part is the strongest.
Well, everything is cut into the right shape, the pipe is cut in the right length. Now we just need to grind and sand the surface to get a good connection. If you look very well you will see that the dust that comes off is white and not black. I am grinding the layer of glass fiber that I'm always gluing over my carbon. And we also have to grind the little pipes, which I can just hold in my hand. This grinder goes so slowly, but with so much strain basically, that it doesn't spin the pipes out of my hand. I have to support them a little bit to put pressure on them, turn them around, do the bit that you hold in your fingers. And that's the grinding job done. All bits are sanded and grinded. Everything is cleaned up again. That looks like a good surface for connection with the carbon.
But first, we're going to put this pipe on here as planned, and for that we're going to put some hot glue on here. That's going to keep this pipe nicely in place. And that stuff is always hot. That's why it's hot glue. Arie. And then we stick it into place. Now I can put a filler here, and here I will make quite a big filler to kind of level that a bit out. You don't want it to go in the pipe, so that's to do it.
And the next day I make borders for my carbon fiber with brown boxing tape glued on pieces of foam. The carbon fiber can now put precisely in between those pieces and even pressed, but it will be exactly where I want it to be. The carbon pipe is not cut in the middle, but I made two pieces, one from each side, and screw them together for the fibers that get pressed in between there. Epoxy would come into the pipe, and then obviously the axle would not longer fit in there. You can see all the carbon fiber is cut, and you can see very nicely how it fans out over the area. In between those layers come other bits of carbon fiber to help spreading out the loads. To get a best connection we make fillers in the corners to make everything nice and smooth, and we fill out all the flat surfaces with a tiny layer of Capasil and epoxy to get the best connection possible for this job, to get it nice and strong. It's still early, but it's gonna be a very hot day today, so I have to work as fast as I can to get this job done before the temperatures will make it impossible. And with a brush I paint around the pipe because the roller will make a mess of my fillers in there. I've already impregnated all the carbon fiber pieces I need with the right amount of epoxy, so it's just basically putting them nicely into place now. And what you see me doing now doesn't go over the pipe, it's basically making a good connection from the bulkhead towards the sides. By doing this we create fibers going in different directions, spreading their loads over a much bigger area. There's already enough epoxy in the carbon, but I'm just using the roller to get the air out and get them nicely into place. And the second one is not laid over it, but nicely aligned alongside, so we don't make a little unnecessary bump. And I'm working on two sides at the same time to get basically an even way of what I'm doing. And you can hear in the original footage how I'm really worried about the temperature.
Temperature will soar over 30 degrees and that becomes very difficult to work with. Before that happens, I want this all on. That's my goal.
And with these temperatures I have to work fast with these already impregnated pieces of carbon fiber, but it is fun to put them into place, taking your time to just really lay them where they want to go. And this is the last one that connects the bulkhead very strong against the hull. Now it's time to start putting the tapes over the pipe that's gonna make the chain plate. And you can see that without borders that I made from the foam and the brown tape, I could never have kept them as nice in place as now. They perfectly fit in between there, and I can pull the fibers when they pass that area a little bit to the left and the right without pulling them off the top. I only have 10 cm wide tapes of carbon and I need to go in between this area of 4. So I have to fold them double, and I know there's a little bit of space to squeeze the fibers nicely in between the borders. So that will all work out well. And then on the bottom I fan them out a bit again to spread the load over a bigger surface area as possible. And you can see very well how I'm using my fingers basically to wipe the fibers down, basically stretch them as tight as possible around there. There on my little table surface are all the already rolled in pieces of carbon that I lay one by one over the top in between, nicely getting all the fibers aligned and tied down. Bit of rolling after that just to make sure that everything is nice in place. It's not a complicated job in my opinion, it's just taking the time to do it secure. And I enjoy it, because it gives something that looks so strong, that is so strong. If it was just only that I had slower epoxy hardener, which I don't have, so that I didn't have to rush so much, because this makes me sweat, and the last thing that you want is getting drips of water in between. I've cut little pieces of carbon fiber where the fibers are actually running 90 degrees of the fibers that go over it, so they're basically in line with the pipe. And those pieces go in between, making the loads also go from left to right and stop any cracking in between the fibers that go down. With modern computers, engineering offices are calculating the forces that run through there, and you will see the beautiful pictures going from green into red and purple where the forces get very high. And then they will give you an exact laminate schedule on how to put every layer of fiber and in which direction they all have to go. And that's even how the wings of modern airplanes are built. And of course they don't do that by hand. They use robotic arms to lay every layer of fiber in the right place. And they have interesting ways where they used to use pre-pack, which is basically what I'm doing, but then the epoxy stopped from curing and kept in freezers not to continue the process. When they have then put it all together, they put it in an autoclave and heaters to get the epoxy to cure under vacuum, and basically making the strongest and lightest possible composite from carbon as they can.
I want it so strong that one side can definitely do it, because we're still thinking about making 2 backstays.
So let's say that this is very low tech, but it's a way that many people can do, and this is something that you can do in the middle of the ocean if something goes wrong. Is it going to be strong enough? Yes, because the fibers will take the load. They just not be as compressed together, so there's more resin in between, and that's unnecessary weight. I'm making something strong enough, but it's heavier than it could be. But is it heavier than all the stainless steel and all the bolts and the reinforcements built for that? I don't think so. And this is a lot stronger, and I trust it a lot more than a stainless steel chain plate. But this is of course very labor intensive, and a very good reason why modern production boats are still using stainless steel plates. But for me the most important reason is that you can do this on an ocean with just a grinder. And obviously you can fix stainless steel, but you need a lot more tools to be working with that and the power to run them. And of course there's place for stainless steel shackles and other things on a boat like this. We will be making lots of little bits of the rigging with the new Dyneema rigging that's gonna come out of bits of carbon, which can break sometimes and which need to be replaced, or at least maintained or altered to make this boat function very well.
Okay, that's all the carbon on one side done.
I'm happy with it. I have 2 very strong chain plates built in a very simple way, and I hope that you learned something of it. This is what I hope you can do yourself, and in another episode I will explain more about vacuum backing and infusion, what are the pros and the cons. Still working on the sandbank in our case, we always have surprises. Of course the fishermen think that the hoop on top of our anchor is actually perfect secured to anchor their boats. Every day there's something happening here, boats that run aground on the sandbank, fishermen that doing things like this. It's funny and it made us laugh. I thought this was more fun to show you than how I put glass fiber and filler over it, since you have seen that so many times, and the next morning I can take my screws out and take the borders away. The middle one is really stuck, and the sticking out bits of carbon and glass fiber are very sharp, so I have to use a tool that if this breaks my hands don't pull open, which I've done more than once. But you can see it all comes off perfectly. So that's my chain plate. Here's the pipe. And we need to cut out this little bit, and then a pin goes in here, and you can see the hole that was closed off with this piece of tape. This is going to be a very secure chain plate, and let's hope that we did all the measurements right and it's standing in the right angles, because there's nothing gonna change that anymore. The epoxy is not fully cured yet, and I can still easily with a Stanley knife cut away all the sharp bits that's sticking out on this. And now it's getting cleaned up and the borders are taken away. You can see very well in the black lines there are no air bubbles to be seen. I'm not saying there's nothing, but I've been wiping and squeezing it with my fingers in a squeezy till I hear no more pop 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 pop, the little popping of the bubbles of air coming out of the material. It looks very nice, especially after sanding, and I'm very happy with these chain plates. There's a lot more to be done to them, because those are gonna stick to the deck, and then we will make nice little corners on them, so the whole thing looks actually just like 2 little blobs on top of the deck on which you just hang the backstay. And nobody will ever see again what was done underneath. Now we can start building the steps and cut open the transom, which will be in the next episode up here in your right corner. And you can subscribe to our channel by clicking the bottom down here in the left hand corner. Here in the right hand corner are a playlist of our sailing adventures and building videos. Special thanks to all our subscribers and those that support our channel. We appreciate your comments and your likes, and we do our best to respond as soon as possible. Thank you for watching this episode of Living on the Ocean.